Hey everyone, welcome to Show It Better. My name is Steven, and today we are going to see how we can go through a whole post-production process in a V-Ray render using only V-Ray. No third-party apps like Photoshop. All the magic that we usually leave for other places will be done right here. This may be kind of a long video, so grab a cup of coffee or save this video to watch later because I assure you it is going to be super useful for your projects in the future. Before we start, I want to mention that you can download V-Ray for Sketchup in the link down below. This video is sponsored by Chaos. They got in touch to see what I thought of their newest version of V-Ray for Sketchup. As some of you may know, I have been a V-Ray user for some years now, but I had not made a video on it for a while. So I am really happy that I got the opportunity to create this video because what I'm about to show you is going to blow your mind. This video will be centered mainly in the post-production process inside the V-Ray frame buffer. So our starting point will be a render. If you want me to make videos on other parts of the process, like creating the 3D model, scattering, looking for references, composition, etc., comment down below and let me know. Now let's start with the video. Okay, so very quick, I want to show you the 3D model that we will be working with. I'm saying very quick because the majority of this tutorial is going to be taking place in the V-Ray frame buffer. But for now, I just want to show you how this 3D model is composed. We have a series of vegetation that is all downloaded from the Chaos Cosmos asset library, where I found different types of pine trees. I also found different types of grass, which I scattered throughout these sandboxes. And also, this is the actual building. It's not that detailed. It has some curtains that were also downloaded from the Cosmos library. Some people, everything, the majority of things was downloaded from the Chaos Cosmos library. That's basically it. It's a very simple model. And we also have a tree line in the background, which gives everything a little bit more definition when it comes to the background of the renders and more color and consistency in the reflections. We have these power lines, and that is basically it. This is the scene that we will be working with, scene 5, where we see, a set of detailed trees in the foreground, and then, not so detailed trees in the background and in the middle ground, with some people, with some details, with some lights in the background. So these are all things that you're going to see in the render when we render it out. But I just wanted to let you know in case you are interested in creating a similar model. Before we start rendering, you want to take into account that you have to activate a series of render elements for our post-production process to work in the best way possible. So we are going to go to our asset editor right here. We are going to go to this tab where it says render elements, and we're going to start adding render elements that will facilitate and help us in our post-production process inside of the V-Ray frame buffer. So you might want to first add the usual render elements that you would use, like for example, the render ID, which groups by color each object. Then I also normally add elements like the refraction and the reflection so we can manipulate them in post-production later. And then we have these series of 3 elements that are going to help us a lot in this new version of V-Ray that were not there before. And those are the crypto matte mask, the multi-matte materials, the multi-matte objects. And these are going to help us make easier selections and easier masks when it's time to modify each material or each object. So I'm going to click on crypto matte, I'm going to click on multi-matte, and I'm going to activate multi-matte objects. And one quick tip that I learned creating this video is that instead of going down and adding each render element separately and then going down again, what you can do is right click on top of render elements, and you can add various render elements using the control key. So I'm going to add object ID, extra texture, light analysis, Lightmix, Z-depth, lighting, global illumination, etc. So that way I don't have to go down and add each element separately. If we go to crypto matte, we can see that the parameters for creating this render element is by ID type. So if we have this drop-down menu, we can organize it by object name, material name, object name with hierarchy, or layer name. So you may want to adjust this if you have a very specific set of needs for your crypto matte mask. Now, in terms of fog, atmosphere, environment fog, and even if you want to add a lot of depth to your image, I recommend you always have turned on these 2 channels. The first one is the Z-depth channel, and the second one is the atmosphere channel. So the atmosphere channel is going to work if you have the volumetric media such as fog or aerial perspective activated, and the Z-depth channel is going to create a grayscale image from the point of view of the camera, and it's going to show in a certain scale of gray, black, and white which object is closer to the camera and which object is further to the camera. So this is going to help you when you want to add dark shadows to your foreground to create a contrast between your foreground and your main subject. Now, one of the most important channels that you have to have activated in order for your Lightmix option to work, and also in order for you to be able to manipulate your lights in the composite option, is this Lightmix render element. As you can see, we have very different ways of grouping this Lightmix channel. So I have a very small scene, so I'm going to group them by individual lights. I don't have as many lights. But if you have a very big urban scene, for example, you may want to group your lights by instances or by layers, and this will help you manipulate them in an easier way. Okay, so let's take a look at how this V-Ray frame buffer works and how we can use it as a post-production tool, which can pretty much leave our renders finished, and we would not need a second or a third-party program to finish this. Now, as you guys can see, my image is still rendering right here, and while it's still rendering, I can start making modifications to the image, or after it's rendering, I can still make modifications over here. So I'm going to show you specifically how this works. I'm going to show you how the layer panel works, how the masking process works, how the Lightmix option works, and of course, how the composite works. Let's go with the layer tab. The layer tab is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. If you don't have it, maybe you will see your frame buffer like this. You'll just drag it out from the right, and you will see a series of different layers that come with your default image under the tab of display correction. So inside of this tab, you will always have all of your different adjustments, and you can start adding different kinds of adjustments to your image by clicking on the plus button or right clicking on top of the display correction tab and going to new layer and adding a lookup table, curves, color balance, saturation, etc. What you can't add inside of the display correction folder is a render element. You can add that inside of a composite folder, which we will see in a few minutes. But for now, we are only going to add adjustment layers inside of the display correction folder. So for example, I want to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer. I'm going to go here to where it says hue and saturation, and any modifications that I make over here will be applied to the final image. This is pretty basic, pretty straightforward. It's nothing pretty new, but what you can do, maybe what you don't know, is that you can make these modifications with masks. So you can maybe select different kinds of elements like the grass, like the trees, and you can mask them out and make specific corrections. So for example, I want to decrease the saturation of the grass and make it a little bit more yellow. So what I can do is go to display correction, right click, go to new layer and go to hue and saturation. And here, before I do anything, I'm going to go where we have this kind of drop down menu, and we have three options: multi-matte mask, integer mask, or crypto matte mask. You may not have heard of these before, but these are different render elements that you can choose to export when you're going to render this, that they're going to be visible right here. For example, this is the crypto matte mask. Works by grouping different certain set of materials or a certain set of groups. It really depends on which of the three they are. Or if you are choosing an integer mask, you can select the integer mask option, and right here, the drop-down menu, you select three different elements. So for example, the render ID element, the object ID, or the material ID. So in this example, I'm going to select the integer mask. So I'm going to erase this. I'm going to go here and select the crypto matte mask, And now where it says pick, I'm going to click on it and pick one side of the grass. And if I want to see how the selection is being made, I can click on show preview when selected. As you guys can see, the majority of the grass is selected, but I need to choose a little bit more because we have all these dark patches. So I'm going to click inside right here and click one more time right here.
Now I'm going to turn this option off of show preview and go back to my properties tab. And now I can decrease the saturation and maybe make it a little bit more yellowish tone, a little bit more with a fall kind of vibe. And that is how you basically create adjustments with masks inside of the V-Ray frame buffer. Now this can obviously get a little bit complex, a little bit interesting, and I will show you how. But for now, let's just leave this as it is. I'm going to erase this layer right here, click on delete. What I want to explain to you next is the Lightmix option. Now, if you click on the source RGB, you will see 3 different options to toggle on or off. So you have the RGB mode, the Lightmix mode, or the composite mode. Basically, the RGB is all of your image baked in together, so you don't have all of the elements separate. You don't have the sunlight separate versus the interior lights. All of these are baked into one image, so you can't modify them easily. What you can do is go into your Lightmix mode, select it, and as soon as I select it, you will see that I have all of these interior and exterior lights, all the lights that are inside of my scene. I have them right here, and I can manipulate them individually. I can change the hue, change the intensity, and basically create a ton of different renders just with this option. And I'm going to show you how. So let's start by turning off this all layer, and this is going to turn off all of the lights that are inside my render. And I'm going to go to my environment light, and I'm going to turn it on. And as you will see, I'm only going to have the environment light. If I want to make this a little bit darker, I can decrease the opacity right here, maybe change it to a 0.6. And now let's say that I want to turn on the lights that are inside the building. So I'm going to turn on, for example, this rectangle light, and I'm going to increase the intensity of the rectangle light. And maybe I'm going to make this light a little bit warmer. So I'm going to go inside of this color format and select a preset, or I can adjust it here manually. So for example, let's select this kind of orange, I think would be nice. And we can increase the intensity of the light. We can turn off all the lights that are in the bottom as well. And we have a specific render right here. I mean, this is a very interesting render. We could, if we wanted to, we could change the light of the environment to maybe a more cold kind of look. I can select here cold sky or clear sky, I'm sorry. And here, this is one kind of render that you can have. As soon as you have this preset saved, one option that you have is you can save this preset, or you can import different presets from the same kind of a model where it's organized in the same way, and you can basically create a ton of renders. So I saved some, and I'm going to show you how they look. So I'm going to click reset right here. So it's going to erase all of this different settings that I had, and I'm going to go to load. I'm going to search for the folder where I have my preset saved. I'm just going to select one, open it, and as soon as I open it, if I click on this drop down menu, you will see that I have all of the different presets saved right here. Now, take into account this is the same render time. It's still rendering, and it hasn't even finished. But while it was rendering, I had the time to create 5 or 6 different kinds of renders, where you can see very different kinds of vibes, very different types of information that maybe show the building more, maybe show the context more. So for example, I liked this one very much, which shows a green kind of light, which has like a kind of a movie vibe. Then I have this harsh sunset kind of look where we don't see much of the interior, but we see much more of the context around the building. And we also have a more cloudy dusk kind of vibe where we don't see any hard shadows, we don't see any hard lights, we just see the inside of our building. And this looks very interesting, and that is basically how the Lightmix works. It lets you create different styles, different mixes of light, and create different renders with the same point of view, with the same computer, and at the same time. Now, I want to show you the third option, which is the composite mode. If we go to Lightmix right here, I'm going to reset this once again, and I'm going to click on composite.
One important thing to mention is that the composite workflow is most commonly used for reconstructing the beauty from a set of elements. The corrections can then be applied to the individual components like reflection, refraction, GI, background, etc. Another interesting point here is that in the next update, V-Ray 5 for SketchUp, update 2.2, V-Ray will introduce a back to beauty render element, which will internally add all of the other passes and automatically set up the reconstruction in the VFB, in the V-Ray frame buffer. You can read more about this in the V-Ray 3D Mattes for Docs page if you are interested. Right here, I'm going to right click on source and create a new layer, and I'm going to create a folder. You always want to organize all of these things inside a folder. Maybe name this maybe dusk render. And inside of this folder, I am going to, for example, start modifying the sky, right? So I'm going to start modifying the background sky. So I'm going to add a render element. Now inside of this render element, I'm going to go and select the environment tab, and I'm going to reduce the tab to maybe a 0.65. Now I'm going to go again to dusk, right click, create a new layer, and create a lookup table so I can insert a 3D LUT. I'm going to go and find my 3D LUT. So for example, let's select this one very quickly. And here, of course, I can see which 3D LUT fits best my image. But what I can see is that my sky is a little bit overexposed. So what I can do is lower the opacity, of course, of this LUT and lower the opacity of the sky color. So let's just leave it just like this. And what we want to do is maybe turn on the lights inside, right? That would be kind of cool. So I'm going to right click, go to dusk, go to new layer, render element, and find the light or the group of lights that represent that space. So here I turned my light on. I'm going to change the color of the lights to maybe a orangey kind of color. And I can maybe increase the intensity just a bit. And one of the things I can do is lower the reflections. So I can right click on dusk, new layer, add a render element, and I'm going to search for the refraction render element, which is this one right here, and it lets me see inside of the building or through the building. And I'm just going to lower the opacity and start to maybe increase it just a bit, so we don't see so much reflections over here. So for example, let's leave it maybe at 0.1. So if we turn it off and on, you can see that the inside is much more visible than it was before. So we can start increasing it. But now let's say that you want to do this in the top part of these windows, but you don't want to do them in the bottom part because you have unwanted reflections. So what you can do is add a mask to this refraction layer. Go over here to integer mask, then go to render ID and pick the ones that you only want to be visible. So I'm only going to choose these window frames that are on the top. Those are the only ones that I want to lower the refraction value. So I'm just going to select them very quickly. And if I go back to my properties tab, start adjusting it, you guys can see that if I increase the value of that layer, of that refraction layer, it will only be visible on the parts that I selected because I used a mask. It's very similar to other programs, but it's I think it's much easier. And we can all do this process while the image is still rendering. So you guys can see I still have a little bit left, but I can start modifying and start adjusting different things. So having this said, I want to show you the breakdown of some of the images that I created just using this composite layer and of course the Lightmix feature. So I'm going to open this previous layers tab, and I have saved right here. Let's see how many. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different renders. So I'm going to turn each of these on. As you guys can see, all of these are organized in their folders just so we don't get any confusion. This is the first one, a strong sunset and lights on kind of vibe, where the majority of this was done inside of the composite tab, where I have a color correction tab, a material correction, where I made this material a little bit whiter, and also I made these shrubs a little bit darker as well. And I also have a filmic tone map, which just gives it a little bit of a cinematic vibe, where all of the contrasts are a little bit off of place. The next one I have is the one that I like the most, and it's this one. It's a night scene. So if we open the tabs up, again, we have two different folders. One is the Lightmix folder, and the other one is the corrections tab. So I'm going to turn off the corrections tab, and I'm going to go to my Lightmix folder. As you guys can see,
we have all of the lights. And if we turn on the corrections, if we open the corrections folder, we can see that we have different kinds of adjustments. The first one is a reflection adjustment where I increased the reflections, and of course using a mask inside of this folder so we can only see the reflections, increase the reflections of this top volume right here. I also added a lookup table. I added an exposure adjustment to the general image. I added a hue and saturation layer. I also added an exposure correction to these shrubs right here. I added an exposure correction to this tree right here to give it a little bit more depth. And I added a hue and saturation layer to these patches right here so they wouldn't look as blue and they looked more kind of like the dirt that they are. And this is pretty much this this night scene image, which I liked a lot. We also have a more artistic kind of Blade Runner kind of image, which I liked as well. And then we have a cloudy, kind of foggy-ish kind of image, where if we open it, we can see that we have a Lightmix folder and we have an adjustments folder. So one of the interesting things about this adjustments folder is that we have a Z-depth layer that is adding more fog. So if we see right here, it's just an element that was added. And on top of the Z-depth layer, we added a constant layer, which is kind of like a solid color fill, and we colored this fog into a yellowish color. So if I can come back here and of course color it in a more red kind of tone or in a bluish kind of tone, if that is something that is a look that I want as well. So let's just leave it like this because I think it could look interesting as well. And this is you know, a big change from this being the basic render to having the option to have this render, also this one, and of course also this one. It is just very cool to see how productive we can be in all. So I can create different kinds of scenes, and then with all of these composite adjustments layers, we can import them and use them in other scenes of this same 3D model. So if you wanted to export, for example, the settings for the night scene, I would just click on top over here and click on Save Layer Tree Preset. And that will save all the adjustments, of course, and it only works for the same model if all of the layers are named the same. If all the structures is the same, then you can change the perspective and create another render, and it will still look very, very good.
And also one very cool new feature that we have now in the V-Ray frame buffer is the sharpen and blur tab, which, as you can see, you can adjust the amount of sharpen and the blur radius so your image can have a much more realistic look.
Now, one of the things that I also want to show you is cloud rendering, Chaos Cloud, and we can render a ton of our images with credits, and we can render it even if we don't have the time, if we have to do more things on our computer. If you don't have a powerful computer, don't worry. You can use Chaos Cloud. So I'm going to click right here on top of Render with Chaos Cloud, and that is going to open my account. Here I have opened my Chaos Cloud account. This just opened when I clicked on Chaos Cloud, and it says information about the project, select project, what name I want to give to the render. So for example, let's call it exterior render, and we can click on a draft if we want to just create a quick draft, or we can create an 8K image to see, you know, the final image. Here, the majority of the settings are the ones that we already have in our render output window. And here it gives us some recommendations. And one of the things that they always recommend is to just put one credit limit if we are just creating test renders to see how it's looking, if you want to create the final render. And when we're going to create the final render, we can also select the limit of, for example, 10 credit limits and wait for it to render, right? So let's select, for now, let's just select one credit limit and click on submit. Okay, now so we can finally see how this image is rendering. We can see the state right here. We can pause it if we need to maybe not use the credits. And here we can see the image in its full resolution once it's rendered. So this is how the process of my rendering in Chaos Cloud is looking. I submitted another image that is rendering right now, but since I limited my credits to 1, Vray let me know that I reached my credit limit. And with that credit limit, I got this kind of image, which if we zoom in, it's pretty good. But if we had maybe 3 to 4 credits, we could get the final image. Now, this image took 12 minutes and 33 seconds to render. And if I want, I can click on stop right here. I can click on download right here. So this prompts up. I can download it with a Chaos app, or I can enable a Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive to save my files. So I'm going to download with my Chaos Cloud app, and I'm going to open the Cloud app, and I'm going to select where I want my file to be saved. So I'm going to look for a folder right here, and it's going to download my image. Okay, so this was the result that I got from the cloud rendering. So these were all the channels that I would normally get in normal render. If we wanted, we could import these into Photoshop and do the whole post-production process. But since we know that it can be so much easier once we are in the VFB file, what we can do is import this EXR file. When we go over here to our frame buffer, we go to File, Load Image, and we select our EXR file, and it's going to load up all of our different render channels. So I have it loaded up right here. I have, all of the render channels that I would normally have. And if you did as I recommended, and if you saved it, if you saved the tree file, you can just go over here to Load Layer Tree Preset. Go to wherever you saved it as. So I'm gonna go to the Blue Night and select this tree file and click on open. And voila, here it is. It was that easy. Now, and that is it. It was that easy. Now I can save this image, or I can use another image, etc., etc. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to render another file. So this is the other point of view I'm going to render, and I'm going to click on render from Chaos Cloud, wait for it to open. I'm going to limit my credit again to only 1 credit because I don't want to waste all of my credits, and click on submit. I'm almost going to reach my credit limit. Here it says 2.9 credits spent. So I'm just going to click on stop right here. And now I'm going to click on download and select folder. Okay, so it finished downloading. So I'm going to open my frame buffer. I'm going to clear this image right here, clear image, clear all channels. Yes, please. Now I'm going to go to file, load image, look for my image, which is second perspective, and load the EXR file. Okay, so I have finished loading up my image. The image looks pretty cool. It also has some lens effect from my previous project, and I also have all of the render channels. But as you guys know, we already did that whole process. We already did that, the hard work. And what we need to do is just go to source RGB, go to composite, and load a tree preset that we saved from before. So I'm going to load a tree preset. I'm going to go to Blue Night because I like that one a lot, and open it, and voila. There it is. And now why not? Let's load another one. I think we have another one right here. Red Night, maybe it doesn't work as well. But for example, let's turn this one on. This looks pretty cool. I mean, my renders are already done. This is the craziest thing about the new version of V-Ray and the Chaos Cloud Manager, that we can create tons of renders, or maybe 2 to 3 renders with the work of just 1, right? So that is something that that I'm really excited about, and I think works very, very good in this image. So for example, here, what I would do is just desaturate maybe the sky a little bit more, because it's not, it's a little bit too saturated for my taste. So what I can do is just add a correction right here, new layer, go to hue and saturation, and just lower everything in saturation, and maybe add another hue and saturation layer. And here we can add in a integer mask. Go to render ID, pick the sky, and then properties, go to saturation and lower the property. Of course, we could also go to new layer, exposure, integer mask again, render ID, pick the sky, and then in the exposure, we can just increase the exposure just a little bit so it doesn't look that dark. And well, this is looking pretty nice. And then we can save our render, and we have a ton of renders. That is basically it. That is how we manage Chaos Cloud.
So these were the results of the post-production process inside the V-Ray frame buffer. With one base render, we got all these other renders. Amazing, right? Also, Chaos Cloud rendering helped us in rendering a second perspective in no time. So what do you think? What is your key takeaway from this video? Do you think you can replace your Photoshop process with the new V-Ray features? Are you using V-Ray? What other features would you like to see in V-Ray? I'm sure our friends at Chaos will be reading your comments, so this is a chance for you to write what you think. Also, if you have any specific questions, make sure to use the timestamps to understand what part of the video you are referring to. Again, if you want to download the program, there will be a link down below. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, remember, an architect communicates ideas through drawings. So strive to show them better. I'll see you guys later. Bye.